Merry Christmas everyone. Thought I'd wear a little festive hat which is not going to stay on my head and I feel a bit like a wizard. But yeah, Merry Christmas. I hope you're all doing well and you've got lots of fun things planned for the festive season, or not. But yeah, sometimes it's nice to just do nothing on Christmas Day. I know last year I went for a walk on the beach, made myself Christmas dinner and watched a film and that was it. So yeah. I just run through a few questions I get asked regarding my tiny house. So I thought I'd do a little tiny house Q&A. I've done a bit of work on it the past few days and I'll make a new video about that, about my tiny house maintenance. Things I should have done before winter came, like pre-winter prep, which I didn't do. But it's now done, so my tiny house should hopefully be a lot happier when it rains. More on that in the next video. But yeah, some of the questions that I get asked. So I guess question number one would be, why am I building a tiny house? I guess the answer to that is there's quite a few. I currently live in shared accommodation. I live at work, basically just because after travelling I needed a job and somewhere to live. So I applied for somewhere that could offer both of those, and I've been here for a few years now and the rent is super cheap. I don't know where I want to live, and to buy a house is very expensive, so I thought I'm going to build a tiny house. So then when I eventually do know where I want to live, or not, it can be moved. If I build one now, I can then move it to where I want to be. And I also just love the tiny lifestyle. I try and live quite minimalistically. I'm trying to live a more sustainable life, be more conscious of things I have and all that. After living in this kind of room, and from travelling, you realise you don't need that much stuff. For my first big travel trip, I went around Europe in a Renault Clio and I took so much. I took a big bag of clothes, I took my backpack full of stuff and some more stuff. And at the end of that trip I realised I hadn't used half the things I'd taken. And also as my travelling adventures have progressed, whenever I go on a flight I always take carry-on, just because I'm a cheapskate and I don't want to pay for baggage, but also just because you don't need that much, and anything you do need you can just go into a thrift shop and buy cheaply, so it's not the end of the world. And I know from hiking the Pacific Crest Trail you have to carry everything on your back for like the whole duration of that trip, and you kind of realise what you do and don't need. So from my kind of experiences from travelling and living and things like that, you kind of realise you don't need half the things that you have. One of the bonuses of having a tiny house, it's not as big, so there's less cleaning involved, so you save time not cleaning a house that big. So yeah, I think they're the main reasons of why I want to build a tiny house. So I get asked. Someone asked me, they were thinking of building a tiny house themselves, and they asked, how many hours do I spend a week building my tiny house? That kind of varies. In winter, as it is now, it's currently the winter solstice today, the 21st of December. In winter, I have not spent as many hours building my tiny house. It's because the days are a lot shorter and the weather's just motivate you to get out. So in my response to how many hours I work on my tiny house in a week, a bad week, 1 hour, on a good week, 12, 14 hours a week. So my tiny house is situated on my boss's dad's land. He's very kindly offered for me to build the tiny house there, which is great. It won't be there forever, it's just somewhere I can build it and then I'll eventually move it on. My eventual plans is to find, ideally, some kind of rundown cottage house with quite a bit of land, quite rurally, park the tiny house on that land. Tiny house planning is quite a grey area. They're classed as like a caravan in the UK planning laws, and you can park a caravan on your land and use it as an extension of the house. So my plan would be to park it on this property that I buy at some point, really with the intention of doing up with all the skills I've learnt from doing the tiny house. So my tiny house would be where I'd live whilst I do up the cottage, barn, whatever it turns out to be, and then I would maybe Airbnb or rent one of the other two off. And then also I love growing vegetables, so I'd have like a veg garden, and amongst other things I'd like to build quite a lot of things, just odd things like I'd love to build a cob pizza oven, I'd love to build a cob house, I'd want to have like a Swedish sauna, which would be great. Eventually I'd love to have like an outdoor shower. Because of all these things I'm naming, I think I'm probably going to have to find a house in Wales, because it's a lot easier to build these kind of things in Wales than it is in England. But yeah, one can dream, I guess. Something else I've been asked is why put it all on YouTube as like a YouTube channel. A part of me thought, why not? It'd be fun to share this journey. There's nowhere near as many British builders as there are like American, Canadian, New Zealand, Australian tiny houses, and I thought I'd share the journey to encourage others to live this lifestyle. But also I thought it'd just be fun. I thought that it could also be held like accountable. So if I have like if I have people like watching my progress, I thought it kind of give me like a bit of a boost to keep going. Not that I lack motivation, but just so I can be held accountable for my tiny house build. Plus also some of the comments I've received have been really lovely, offering tips and advice and just being inspired, so that's been really nice. So thank you for all your lovely comments that everyone has posted on watching my tiny house journey. What's been the hardest part of the build so far? So I will make a little montage of the current build so far, because it has been, well, I started this tiny house journey about a year ago, because that's when I hired the digger, which was so much fun to clear out the space. But the tiny house arrived in March, and the plans for that changed originally. But the hardest part so far has probably just been starting it, really. Putting the deposit down on the tiny house trailer and just going for it. Because I know I kind of staked out the area out in the woods at work to try and get my head around the space. And I remember my boss saw it and he's like, what's that strange kind of like 4 posts with ropes around it in the wood? And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking of building a tiny house. And he's like, oh, cool. And then once the word spread throughout where that's building a tiny house, I got loads of support. That's my original question. So yes, I think starting the build, like just going for it, was the hardest part. Physically building it wise has been currently understanding all the electrics, which I will get someone to check once I've done it all, but it's getting my head around all the ampage and all that. The cladding was pretty tricky. Once I got going, it was fine. But I think just because I was comparing it to my boss's work, and obviously he's got a lot of practical knowledge, so he knew exactly what to do. And then when I took over, I was a bit unsure. But once I got going, I was quite pleased with my cladding efforts. One of the other hardest things has been, not hard, but I think I'm quite pleased with the progress I've made with using the power tools like the circular saw, the jigsaw cutter, just using tools like that. I'm quite pleased with it's the first time using those kind of things. Other obscure skills like learning to chop wood, because I'd never done that before, and also I'm going to need to fuel my wood burning stove. And then luckily my sister had a tree down, and I ended up with most of her wood. So learning to chop wood's been great. I'm learning loads of new skills, like even the digger. So now when that got dropped off by the company, they kind of just whizzed through all the instructions, then handed me the keys, and I was like, thanks. And then they kind of drove off, and it's just me standing next to this digger, been like, okay. And then I just kind of put the keys in and just went for it, and then the rest is history, and I had a blast digging and sorting out the area. I'm pleased with the progress I've been making on the tiny house. What would I say to others wanting to build a tiny house? I'd probably say just go for it. If it's something you really want to achieve and have, then research is probably the main thing. Look at inspirations. Like I've got like an inspiration board up here. It's looking a bit bare. I need to add a few things for this coming year. But yeah, that helps above my desk of how I want the tiny house to look. Don't be afraid of asking for help. So people, they do want to help you. Like I've had loads of comments, and also like my family, friends asking, thinking like if you want to borrow any tools or so. Yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. Yeah, and then just research and go for it. Once you get started, it does become a lot easier, because at first it's a hugely daunting task, but once you get going, it's all good. So yeah, my tiny house journey began about a year ago in November 2020, and we were just coming out of lockdown. We're still in this weird transitional period. We're kind of still in it now, a year on, like nothing's really gone back to normal. Not that I ever think it will go back to normal. But yeah, I put down a deposit on the tiny house trailer, which was due to come the following year in about February 2021, but it got delayed, and it got delayed again, due to COVID and other reasons, the tiny house trailer will be delayed until June, July. I was hoping to do the bulk of like building the frame and all that in like spring, summertime, but they offered me a pre-built frame along with the trailer and some windows for a bit extra, and they said you can either wait until July for your intended trailer, or you can have this pre-made frame with the windows. And I know at first I was a bit like, oh, I want to do it myself, I want to do it all from scratch, and so I remember umming and ahhing. I decided to just go for it because it turned out to be a good deal considering the price of wood and the amount of wood I would need to build the frame. And looking back, I am glad that I did accept that, just because having to work out all the angles and the framing probably would have driven me insane. And so long story short, I'm glad that I accepted the same size trailer with the frame, and they gave me 8 windows to use in the tiny house. So once I accepted it, they were like, cool, yeah, we want rid of this. So in a week's time, this trailer and the frame just turned up. And I remember it looked huge, and I was like, oh my god, this is so big, what have I done? And I kind of feel sorry for the guy who reversed it into its parking bay where it is at the minute, because he broke his clutch reversing it in. But yeah, so that arrived. And then from there, my bosses were such a great help on that day, because my boss and his wife were both there to help me get the house wrap on. So I think I was quite overwhelmed when it arrived. My boss, she was able to just direct everyone else to try and get the house wrap on, and I climbed inside and stapled the house wrap onto the tiny house. And then after that, the next step was I had to varnish all the 12mm ply boards to go on the roof, and then we put more house wrap on that, and then put the metal roofing on top, and then from there we put the windows in. I think I got about 10 windows with the tiny house. From that I used about 7 or 8, sold the 2 that I didn't want, got 3 second hand off eBay, and then the only window I got made specifically for the tiny house is the circular window porthole. And then you put the windows in, and then did the cladding, and then the subfloors in thanks to my dad and his friend, and that's where I'm pretty much up to now. Did some winterproofing the other day. So yeah, that's my tiny house journey up to date. And I'm hoping in a year's time, where would I like to be? Well, I'd like to spend Christmas in the tiny house. So yeah, I guess I will end this here. I hope you enjoyed my little rambling session. Please enjoy the little montage clip, which you will now watch. And I wish you all a very lovely Christmas, or if you celebrate or if you don't, relaxing day, whatever you get up to. And I might see you in the new year. I might upload a video in the meantime. Probably see you in the new year. But yeah, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Holy moly! Look at the size of this place! Bedroom?
Yeah.
My room?
Yeah.